Love a little Creed on a Tuesday morning. Tonight's message is now from Nelson Braff, Anthony Scaramucci's guy at the Hunt and Fish Club, that great restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. He watched the video, and again, you can all watch it on Facebook and Twitter. It's everywhere now. Anyway, we've got a wonderful guest coming up. He's got a new book out, and it's titled Collusion. In fact, he's going to sign it tonight at my favorite place. I did a book signing there, too. Bookends in Ridgewood, New Jersey at 7 o'clock tonight. He spent 4 years between 1995 and 1999 as the Speaker of the House. And he's got, along with Bo Dietl, one of the great podcasts out there today, Newt's World, a bunch of great guests and very diversified topics. So here he is now, a good friend of the Bernie and Sid in the morning show, Newt Gingrich. Good morning, Newt. How are you, pal?
Well, I'm doing great, and it's a great morning in New York.
It is a great morning in New York, and it's always great when you're here. Now, this book, Collusion, is interesting because I guess it's fiction, but it's really not.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an alternative reality, and we wrote it in part as a novel to remind people that the Russians really are dangerous. That even though Mueller cleared Trump, and you know, certainly Trump had nothing to do with that kind of collusion. We have in our novel Collusion a Senate aide who is basically a Russian spy, and Putin decides, or the character who is the Putin lookalike, if you will, decides to poison the entire U.S. Senate. And it's an amazing story, and it partly builds on the fact that the Russians have this passion for poisoning people. And more than any other country in the world, they develop very, very sophisticated and arcane poisons, and they use them, as they did last year in Great Britain. So we also think it's a very contemporary story because we have a Navy SEAL who's severely wounded and in the process of recovery ends up with an opioid addiction and has to be coping with that and recovering from that at the same time that he's serving his country. I think it brings home to people how real, how real the challenge is of the opioid addiction and the total pattern we're seeing of basically an epidemic of people who are coming down and are addicted.
Ex-Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, the new book is called Collusion. It's a novel, a historical novel, and I read your book, Gettysburg, which was another historical novel. It was fantastic. But speaking of collusion, Newt Gingrich, the real collusion, of course, the Mueller report came out, and the president, no collusion, maybe obstruction of justice, he says, but then the bar says no. But the real question is this. Barr says he's going to investigate, as you point out, that the deep state, that the senator who was working with Russia. In this case, you may have had some FBI people and some Department of Justice, maybe even Brennan. What can you tell us about that?
Well, look, I don't think this story is anywhere near over. I think that we have clear evidence that the Obama administration, and of course with Joe Biden running for president, he's going to have to answer these questions. But we have clear evidence of the Obama administration basically attempting a coup d'etat. I mean, they were doing things that were clearly totally illegal and using the FBI in a way that was illegal. The Attorney General was doing things that were illegal. And the president and vice president had to have known about it. This stuff doesn't just happen in a vacuum. No. So I think there's a lot we still have to learn. And recently it's begun to be reported that it's possible that the entire original dossier that the Clinton campaign paid for was actually a Russian disinformation project. Now, there would be some kind of a grand irony if the document they were using to try to destroy Trump was in fact a Russian document, and the Clintons, who of course over the years have been very close to the Russians, the Russians paid Bill Clinton $500,000 to speak in Moscow. They gave millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, gave the Russians a large part of the American uranium production. So there are a lot of very suspicious things here. And I don't think if you care about the Constitution and you care about the rule of law, I don't think we can back off and not get to the bottom of all this.
Hey, Newt, I spent some time yesterday out in front of the New York Times building here in New York City involved in a big protest. You know, you've been on this for a long time, as has our friend Bill O'Reilly and so many others, talking about the media and the Times in particular, their political bias. We get it, the political bias. But now they're doing something, again, they've been doing for a very long time, which is anti-Semitism. This cartoon that came out a couple of days ago with a blind Donald Trump being led by a dog, Netanyahu, really disgusting. And it does go back, not just the New York Times, to some of the folks that want to gain power in this country on the left. Our point is, this is a lot more dangerous, Newt, than just a cartoon. What do you think?
Oh, look, I was asked yesterday about a Washington Post report that Donald Trump had either lied or used misinformation 10,000 times. And my answer was, I don't take the Washington Post seriously. It's a hate Trump, newspaper. The New York Times is a hate Trump newspaper. These are folks who get up in the morning and say, I know Donald Trump did something terrible. I wonder what it was. They're not newspapers anymore. They're propaganda sheets for the left. And I think they have really undermined the news media and the respect the news media once had. I think it's really remarkable if you think about how biased they are. And it also tells you something about how strong Trump is as a person, that they had something, like 92% negative coverage, and he just kept going. I mean, he didn't deviate. He didn't soften up. He has continued to appoint conservative judges. He's continued to deregulate government. He's continued to fight for America internationally. And if that makes the New York Times unhappy, I think Trump just relishes it and keeps moving.
No doubt about it. Newt Gingrich, again, the book is Collusion. Tonight at Bookends in Ridgewood, New Jersey at 7 o'clock. Newt Gingrich said, Joe Biden, Mr. Speaker, he just jumped into the race. To me, he looks a little feeble, and nobody believes he asked Obama not to endorse him. And he repeated the Charlottesville canard, which you and others have debunked. Can you do that again here, please?
Sure. Let me say, first of all, if you look at what Trump actually said about Charlottesville, it's very clear that he said there are people who are sympathetic to keeping the statue up, and there are people who are opposed to keeping the statue up, and they were decent people on both sides. And then he said there were racists, there were Klansmen, there were Nazis, and these were bad people, and he condemned them. And when you read it, it's very clear where he came down and what he was saying. But if you watch this whole thing, the left goes around and they invent things. I watched the dialogue on The View Friday about Anita Hill. Anita Hill is a liberal myth. When they got done with the hearings, by 58 to 26, the American people believed Clarence Thomas was telling the truth and she was lying.
Right.
58-26. The left then went out, and for 30 years, they have built up this mythology that somehow she should be apologized to for having lied. Because, and guys like Biden don't have the guts to stand there. This is why I think Trump is seen as a remarkable person. He doesn't have the guts to stand there and say, look, I chaired the hearing. It was a fair hearing. 11 Democrats voted to seat Clarence Thomas because in the end, she wasn't convincing. He couldn't say that.
No.
I mean, even if you trained him and he practiced it in front of a mirror, he would just break down because he's essentially a pander bear.
Yeah, basically.
He wants to run around and pander to whoever he's talking to next.
Newt Gingrich, again, as we've mentioned a couple of times, the book is Collusion. You can catch him tonight, Ridgewood, New Jersey at Bookends, which is a wonderful place, and we compel you, listen to his podcast every week. It's great. Newt's World. Mr. Speaker of the House, thank you so much for stopping by. We look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care. God bless. Newt Gingrich.